He didn't expect anything unusual when she knocked on his door that afternoon. She stood there in the hallway with an apologetic smile and slightly damp hair, as if she had rushed over without thinking twice. "Sorry to bother you," she said, "but my kitchen tap is leaking everywhere. I tried to fix it, but I think I made it worse. Could you take a look?" He nodded. They had been neighbors for months, exchanging polite greetings in the elevator. Sometimes small talk about the weather or the building's noisy pipes. Nothing more. Her apartment smelled faintly of soap and fresh laundry. The sound of dripping water echoed from the kitchen like a ticking clock. She pointed at the sink with visible frustration. "It started as a small leak," she explained, "and now it just won't stop." He rolled up his sleeves and crouched under the sink, examining the pipes. The metal was slick and water dripped steadily onto the floor. She handed him a towel and hovered nearby, watching with quiet attention. "It's an old valve," he said. "Probably just needs tightening." As he worked, he felt her presence more than he saw her. Not in an uncomfortable way, just an awareness that she was standing closer than necessary, as if the small kitchen had shrunk around them. A sudden twist of the wrench sent a splash of cold water spraying outward. It caught them both off guard. She laughed first, a clear, spontaneous sound, and he couldn't help but join in. They both ended up with wet sleeves and droplets on their faces. "Well," she smiled, brushing water from her cheek. "That's what I call a wet reward for trying to help." He chuckled, wiping his hands with the towel. It was an innocent joke, but something about the moment felt different. The tension of the repair was gone, replaced by an unexpected lightness. She poured 2 glasses of water and handed him one. They stood there in the small kitchen, slightly damp, smiling at the absurdity of it all. "Thank you for coming over," she said softly. "I don't usually ask people for help." He shrugged. "I'm glad you did." And as they stood there, the leaking tap forgotten, he realized this simple favor had turned into something he hadn't anticipated. A conversation that lingered longer than necessary, and a feeling that this might not be the last time she knocked on his door. They stayed in the kitchen longer than either of them intended. The tap was finally quiet, no more dripping, no more urgency, yet neither of them seemed in a hurry to return to their separate apartments. She leaned against the counter, still holding the towel, twisting it absently in her hands. "It's strange," she said, glancing at the sink, "how something so small can create such a mess." He smiled. "Pipes are like that. Ignore them long enough and they demand attention." She laughed softly, but her eyes suggested she was thinking about something beyond plumbing. There was a pause, not awkward but thoughtful. The kind of silence that invites honesty. "I don't usually like asking for help," she repeated. "I prefer to handle things on my own, but today I just couldn't." He nodded, understanding more than she had said. Sometimes it's easier when someone else is around, even if they're just tightening a valve. She met his gaze for a second longer than before. "Maybe that's the real reward," she said quietly. "Not the water splash." They moved to the living room, cups of tea replacing the earlier glasses of water. The apartment felt warmer now, less like a neighbor's space and more like a place where a conversation could unfold naturally. They talked about simple things at first: work, the building, the noisy elevator that always seemed to break at the worst times. But gradually, the topics became more personal. She told him how long she had lived alone, how silence sometimes felt heavier than noise. He shared small stories of his own, things he didn't usually tell people he barely knew. Time slipped by unnoticed. At one point she looked toward the kitchen and smiled. "I guess the leak was useful after all." "How so?" "It gave me an excuse," she said, "to knock on your door." He didn't know how to respond to that, but he didn't need to. The meaning was clear without explanation. What began as a practical favor had quietly turned into a moment of connection neither of them expected, and neither seemed ready for it to end. Eventually, the evening settled into a calm neither of them wanted to disturb. The tea had long gone cold on the table, but they were still talking, slower now, more reflective. Outside, the hallway lights flickered on automatically, a quiet reminder that hours had passed. She glanced at the clock and seemed surprised. "I didn't realize it was this late," she said. He stood instinctively. "I should probably let you rest." But she didn't move toward the door right away. Instead, she walked with him to the hallway, pausing near the kitchen entrance. The repaired tap sat there in silence, as if it had never caused trouble at all. "Funny," she said, looking at it. "This morning it was just a problem. Now it feels like the reason for something good." He smiled. "I guess not all leaks are bad." She laughed softly at that, then grew thoughtful again. "Thank you," she said, not just politely but sincerely, "for helping. And for staying." He nodded. "I'm glad you knocked." They stood there for a moment longer than necessary, both aware that this simple neighborly favor had shifted into something warmer, something more human than either of them had expected. When he finally stepped into the hallway, she remained by the door, watching him with a calm expression that held no awkwardness, only quiet understanding. "Good night," she said gently. "Good night." As he walked back to his apartment, he realized he wasn't thinking about the tap, the water, or even the repair. He was thinking about how easy the conversation had felt, how natural it was to stay, how a small, ordinary moment had opened the door to something neither of them had planned. And the next time there was a knock on his door, he knew he wouldn't hesitate to answer.